King of the jungle, they call me Mufasa. You are the cub and I am the lion. Look at my canine so sharp, cannibalism with animals. Both that blunt joint, smoke it pinpoint. Smoke purple, sit boy, cats go salute my dog.
Yo, what's up? I'm back with another tutorial, and today I'm going to show you how to shoot and edit your podcast all at the same time. So the first thing you want to do is know how many people are going to be on the podcast set and how they're going to be seated, because it's going to let you know how many microphones you're going to need and how you're going to tackle your camera angles. So whether it's a 2-person podcast or a 5-person podcast, I normally use 3 cameras for the podcast that I shoot. 2 to 5 is the general number of people that you will see on most podcast sets. So I feel like 3 is a good number of cameras to use. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to shoot a 2-person podcast and a 4-person podcast using just 3 cameras. So let's start with the first camera, and that's your wide angle camera. So you position this camera in front of your podcast set, right in the middle. And this camera captures all the people that are in your podcast set. This is going to be our wide camera. So our wide camera is the camera that's currently shooting my behind the scenes, because we don't have enough cameras. But this is going to be my wide camera, basically capturing everything. You can stand here, Pan. Basically capturing everything in the scene, everybody at the same time.
Right about here.
Right about there.
The point is, if you don't start something, it's not going to happen. You just have to put one first step and then the rest will follow.
Next, I have my second camera, which I position on the left side of the room, which serves to capture the medium to close-up shots of the people sitting on the right side of the room. I know it sounds weird, but the camera that's on the left side of the podcast set captures the people that are sitting on the right side of the set. This is to ensure that the camera captures people from a front angle as opposed to a profile angle, which is what would happen if the camera that's on the left side is capturing the people that are sitting on the left side of the room. And then lastly, we have our third camera, which we put on the right side of the podcast set. This does the exact same thing as the left camera, just from the opposite side. So when you're limited with cameras, you just get 2 people at the same time. There's close-ups, and then we're just gonna keep panning. Whenever someone is talking, keep panning. So that's what you do. Now, because podcasts are conversation-based, clean sounding audio becomes very important in keeping the audience engaged. If the video aspect of it fails at some point during the podcast, the audience can continue listening to the podcast without the visuals, but you can't continue listening without the audio. So when it comes to audio recording, I always prefer to double my audio, which means recording your audio twice. So you'll have your main microphones recording audio, and then you'll have your secondary microphones as a backup in case something happens to your main microphones. Ironically, what usually goes wrong while recording audio is not the microphones themselves, but faulty mic cables, someone forgets to switch on the mic or press record, or the recording device corrupts the files for some reason. Believe me, it has happened to me. So make sure that the main microphones are not recording to the same recording device or memory card as the secondary microphones. In case something goes wrong with one of the devices or memory card, you still have one set of audio. So I use Lapel Mics as my main microphones over the usual podcast mics that you mount on a table. And I record them straight into the camera so that they are already synced with the audio and I do not have to sync them later on. I just always find the table mounted microphones to be so distracting to watch, and they just make the podcast sets look so busy. And I always see this many times where podcast hosts have to remind their guests to speak into the microphone, because at some points the guest gets too comfortable and they lean back and away from the microphone. So with Lapel Mics, they on you. You don't have to, you can speak, you're free to speak, you're free to move, and you're always getting the best sounding audio at all times. And then I use boom microphones as my secondary microphones because I can keep them out of camera sight by placing them above the podcast set. I record my boom microphones into a Zoom recorder, separate from my lapel mics. And I cannot stress this enough. Make sure that you have a pair of headphones and that you are monitoring your audio. Many times in the past, I would just press record because I could see that I'm getting signal on my audio recording device, only to find that there was a huge buzz the whole time in the audio from a faulty cable. So the main thing you want to achieve for podcast lighting is that the people that are on the set are well lit in a way that the lighting is not causing shadows that can be visible on the set. To achieve this, we put 2 lights on the left side and the right side of the podcast set, both at 45 degrees from the middle, facing the talent. In this position, the 2 lights cancel each other's shadows. So this light is facing that way, facing to the left. So that other light is going to face to the right, and then they'll cancel out each other's shadows. Because if we only had 1 light in front of the set facing the talent, we would see the people's shadows at the back of the set. The same thing, if we only had 1 light on either the left or the right side, we would see shadows cast on the opposite side. We also place the lights higher than the set. This is to ensure that any shadows that might occur are cast down on the floor of the set where the camera cannot see them. So this is how I set up for editing while shooting a podcast. I always have a table on the side of the set that I use as my editing station. This is where I set up my computer and the Atem. So for those of you who don't already know, the Atem Mini Pro ISO is a camera switcher, meaning it allows you to switch between cameras and choose which camera view you want the people who are watching to see. The original use of this is when live streaming with multiple cameras. It allows you to switch between the different cameras that you have and choose which camera view you want to send to the people who are watching on YouTube or any social media platform. So with the Atem Mini Pro, it not only does that, but it records all your camera changes that you made during the live recording of the podcast and saves it into a DaVinci Resolve project that it creates automatically for you, saving you the editing process of having to sync all these camera angles and cutting in between them in post. So as soon as the podcast recording is done, so is the editing. Now I know that there's AI tools out there that can do the editing work of cutting between the different camera angles, but I've just found that they're not perfect yet, because you still have to go back to check and fix where it might have not done a great job on certain cuts, whereas with the Atem, I'm still in control of when and where to make the cuts exactly how I want them. So I want to quickly show you how to set up the Atem Mini software so that you can record your podcast. I connect the Atem to the computer using an Ethernet cable. You can also use the USB-C cable to connect the two if you're planning to only record onto the camera SD cards and edit later. But in this case, we want to reserve the USB-C output to connect the hard drive that we'll be using to record the edits that we are going to make while recording the podcast. Once the Atem is connected, I open the Atem control software and link it to the Atem. I then connect HDMI cables to all 3 cameras to send their video signal to the Atem Mini, which has 4 HDMI inputs to accept the video signal from the cameras. We're going to connect this HDMI to the camera, and then we're going to take this HDMI all the way to the Atem. This HDMI is going straight into the Atem, so we're going to put this on HDMI 1. Once your Atem is connected to the software, you then come here. You go to output and then go to record on the software, and then you're gonna name your episode, and I'll be able to pick which drive I want the Atem to record all my changes to. So as you can see over here, I'll be able to change between cameras. Camera 1, which is the one we set up over there, and then camera 2 will be the wide shots once it's connected. Camera 3 will be this one over here. So I'll be editing on the fly like this, and what the Atem is going to do is record all my changes, all the edits that I'm making in real time. So once I'm done in DaVinci, I'll have my project file. Inside, I'll have a timeline with all the edits that I was making while I was recording. And then, yeah, we're good to go. The HDMI cables from the cameras send both the video and audio signal to the Atem software to be recorded. And since my lapel mics are connected to the cameras, that's how I also send the audio from the people speaking on the podcast. Then I connect the Atem to a screen using the HDMI output on the Atem, so I can be able to view and monitor all my different camera angles as I switch between them. So once you're done recording your podcast, you can press stop and remove your hard drive from the Atem Mini Pro and go to the place where you chose to save the project files. So here are all the project files that you get. So you have a folder with all your audio files as separate. So we have all our audio clips from the HDMIs, which is HDMI 1, 2, and 3. And then we have a folder of all our video clips from all the cameras as separate. And you can see here we have camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, and then here we have HDMI 4, which we were not using. That's why we have black video over here. So here we have all the edits that we were making as one complete video with all the cuts. And then here we have our DaVinci Resolve project, which has a timeline for all the cuts that we were making. So this is so that we can be able to further process the video should we need to, and add things like an intro and an outro for the podcast, and maybe further color grade if we need to, or maybe further process the audio. And then as you can see here in the media pool, we also have the same folder structure that we had on our Finder. So this is our timeline. You can see all the cuts that we made during the recording of the podcast. Just add an intro and outro and export the file, and that's it.
So the cool thing about the Atem is that you can actually color grade and mix your audio while you're recording the podcast live.
So you can add things like an EQ to your audio while recording, add a compressor, a gate and a limiter, and then you can also perform your fader mix. And then for color grading, you have your color wheels, and you still have control of your shadows, midtones and highlights. And you can also change your white balance and also control your exposure.
And the cool thing is you can actually zoom your camera, and you can also pull focus while you're recording all this from your workstation. So this is how I'm able to even shoot podcasts as a one-man band, because once I'm at my workstation during the podcast, I can make all these changes on the fly.
Alright, cool guys, I really hope you enjoyed that video, and as always, please like, comment and subscribe, and let's click on that bell so that we get notified when I drop another video. Alright, cool, I'm out of here.